I want to give the key to the final exam in cryptography. So to answer these questions, I'm using a student answer. The student will remain anonymous. Um, so the first question is, what block cipher modes allow you to decrypt a single block of ciphertext without decrypting an entire ciphertext? So if you sort of look through the Wikipedia page on block cipher modes, you might be able to figure this out. So for example, with cipher feedback mode, it is possible, because if I want to decrypt this bit of ciphertext, what do? I need to XOR it with the output of the block cipher when I put in the previous block of ciphertext, and that will give me the plain text. So, you can do that. So the ones that you can do that for are electronic codebook mode, counter mode, cipher block chaining, and cipher feedback mode. And then you can read the details of this answer, which is very good. Now, what if you want to not just decrypt a block independently, but you want to modify it and save it again? So if you have something like an encrypted hard drive, this is something that you would want to do all the time. You want to decrypt just one sector and then make some modifications and then re-encrypt it. So the two modes that we've studied that allow you to do that are electronic codebook mode and counter mode. Electronic codebook mode, of course, is not really a great choice for an encryption mode, and so counter would be the one that you would actually use in a real application. So here you have some background for number 3. It's just sort of setting you up to sign a document using RSA. So here's a document, and I hash it using SHA-256 and then convert the hash to a string, and then I'm going to sign this using this sort of homebrew RSA that we're cooking up here. So here's P, here's Q, here's N, here's phi of N, here's E, and there's D. And so I gave you everything up to here, and this student has written the last 2 lines, which are what you're asked to do, which is to produce the actual signature. And here's the question that goes along with that. What is the signature produced by signing thing to sign with the RSA parameters generated in the above code? So it's right here. So here's the signature as an integer, and here it is in hexadecimal. All right. So there's also some code here for number 4. Let's just skip down to number 4 and then go back up and look at the code. It says, from the above output, you can see that RSA decryption is at least 10 times slower than RSA encryption. Why is that? So what this does is it creates an instance of RSA with 1024 bits, and then it encrypts a message, which is just a few bytes. It's just in ASCII, the word message. And then what this time it magic does in the Sage notebook, or I guess it's a feature of the IPython notebook, it runs this some number of times, and then it gives you the best of 3. So I believe this is microseconds. So it ran it 625 times, and the best 3 times were 30 microseconds per loop. Okay, so that was with encryption. Now compare that to what happens when you do RSA decryption. So similar situation, it goes 625 times. It reports on the best 3, and for the best 3, the average is 483 microseconds per loop, which is much, much slower than encryption. So the question was, why is decryption slower than encryption? And this is the right answer. It's because when you do RSA, you purposefully pick E to be small. And what that does is it makes encryption fast. And if you're talking about signatures, then it makes signature verification fast. But D, you pick E to be small, but then you have no control over the size of D. D will be sort of pseudo-random, so it will be approximately as big as the modulus. So D is much, much bigger than E, and that is the basic reason. It's because you have to do RSA, you have to do the decryption, you raise the ciphertext to the dth power, and so it just takes longer because D is a bigger exponent. All right, number 5. So this one is kind of silly. I mean, silly as in I kind of give you the answer here, but I've regretted not doing this during the semester, so we do it now in the final exam. So, what do you have to keep private when you do RSA? During the semester, we said that you have to keep phi of n private, but we never really explained why very deeply. And the reason is that if phi is public, then you get this system. You get a system of 2 equations and 2 unknowns. So n is public, and phi is public, and you know that whatever the p and q are, they have this relationship to those 2 numbers, and so you can solve this system of simultaneous equations. Here's the code for how to do that using Sage, and you just have to actually do it. And this student did it correctly. And you can see that these are actually like real, industrial strength numbers. They're big, but still you can solve this equation very quickly and get P and Q. For number 6. So this is the only question that the student got wrong. But they got it wrong in sort of the best way possible because it illustrates the weirdness of the situation. So this is a question about the birthday paradox. So it says, suppose you have a playlist with 1,000 songs and you set it to play on random. So you might notice I have totally lost a touch culturally with young people these days, but if you have like an iPod, nobody has an iPod anymore, but people used to have iPods, and you have tons of songs on there, and you would set it on random, and you would find that even if you had a lot of songs, the iPod would have favorite songs that it would play over and over again. And so people thought, this isn't random, but in fact that's what happens when it is random. You get these collisions surprisingly often, and it's because of the birthday paradox. So the birthday paradox is this thing about finding 2 people in a room that have the same birthday. So, you can, this is just the Wikipedia article on the birthday problem. You can look down and see this stuff. So this is the probability that with n people in a room, no 2 people have the same birthday. Well, if you think every time a song gets played at random here, it's like a person is being born and their birthday is something between 1 and 1,000. And so as you play more and more songs, it's like if there were 1,000 days in the year, more and more people are coming into the room. So it's sort of exactly the same situation mathematically as the birthday paradox. So the answer to number 1, give an expression for the probability that there are no collisions after 5 songs have played. What you should write is this expression, except instead of n, you're going to use 5. And instead of 365, you're going to write 1,000. So that is the right answer. And this student is very smart, so maybe I should think harder about whether or not they didn't actually write the right thing here. What did they say? So 1,000, choose 5. Yeah, that's too simple, but it does involve choice. So this would be 1,000, choose 5. But then there are some other things you have to write here. You have to also write 1,000 to the 5th power and 5 factorial. And the second part, about how many songs will be played before the chance of some collision exceeds 50%. This is the thing about the birthday paradox. There don't have to be very many people in a room before it's more likely than not that 2 people have the same birthday. And so the rule of thumb that you can use to figure this out is that it's the square root of the number of birthdays. So there will probably be a collision after you've heard about the square root of 1,000 songs, which is only something like 30 songs. I did it over here. I did a little simulation. So here we go through and we pick a song at random. And if you know Python, then you can figure out what this is saying, but it's basically just looking for a collision. And let's run it and see what happens. So a collision occurred after 32 tries. Surprisingly small, right? But it's exactly what you would expect because the square root of 1,000 is 31. So this is sort of like right on target with the approximation we use for how likely a birthday collision is. And so the answer to this problem is about 32. And this very smart student guessed 500, which is what you would guess, and that's why the birthday paradox is a paradox. It's because your intuition misleads you about how many people need to be present for this weird thing to happen. Okay, so now we do a couple problems on the Diffie-Hellman key exchange algorithm. So here I give you some code, and then you're supposed to figure out Bob's public key and the shared secret. So I think I must have given you the code like up to right there. You could actually look on this one. Yeah, so I haven't done anything here. This is what the student had, and then everything else the student added. So now here's Bob's private key. So what is Bob's public key? It's the generator to the power of Bob's private key mod the large prime, and that's correct. And also the shared secret is the generator G to the power Bob's private key times Alice's private key. Another way to get that is just to raise Alice's public key to Bob's private key. It amounts to the same thing. And that's correct. So for this one, I made a mistake, and the student recognized that this was impossible. But I can show you what I was thinking. So you have the following information, a large prime Q multiplicative generator, the secret, and also Bob's private key, and you're supposed to recover Alice's private key. So let's just review here. What is S? Let's say that Alice's private key is A and Bob's private key is B. Then S is G to the AB, and Bob's private key is B. So what you're supposed to do is you have G to the AB, and you also have B, and the goal here is to recover A. Okay, so you can do it, but the thing that I was thinking that you could do doesn't work. So let me show you why I was confused and thought that this was possible, and I should have tried it myself first, but I didn't. So here's what I thought you could do. I thought you could get Bob's. So you take the multiplicative inverse of Bob's private key mod Q minus 1, and then I was going to raise the secret to that power. And so what that would do is it would cancel out this B right here, and you would have G to the A, and then you could just break the discrete logarithm problem and get A, and then you could, then you would know everything. But a couple things went wrong. It turns out that Bob's private key does not have an inverse mod Q minus 1, so that was sort of the first bad thing that happened. It's still possible to do this. You just have to take the discrete log of S. You have to take the discrete log of S to the base G mod Q. And so that's what this is doing. It's taking a very long time. It will terminate within some amount of time. I just, I forget how I picked Q, but Q is about 200 bits. 198 bits. So before we did this with a 100-bit number, and it completed pretty much instantly, but with 200 bits it's taking a long time. It's been running on my machine all day. So this one was pretty much unanswerable, but if you're willing to, I have no idea how long this is going to take, so it might take a week, in which case this is really ridiculous. If it it's definitely a ridiculous unanswerable question. But if it turns out that it only takes like 3 hours or something, then I guess maybe you could have done it if you're really determined. What you'll know here when this finally completes is what A times B is, and then you can cancel out B. Yeah, you would, because you know B. So anyway, we also didn't talk about how to solve. modular equations where there are elements without inverses involved. You can do it, but there are sometimes multiple solutions. So this just turned out to be a mistake, basically. So maybe I'll just ignore this question, but that's what I was thinking and stuff like that. Sorry. Number 9. Oh, also, I was going to suggest that you look at the computational Diffie-Hellman problem. We didn't talk about it during the semester, but the Wikipedia article is very easy to understand and very short. So if you want to know more about what makes Diffie-Hellman hard, you can read that. Number 9 is, what are the properties that a cryptographically secure hash function must have? And the student is correct. They say it should be resistant to collisions, pre-image, and second pre-image attacks. The book says that it should also be efficient, take arbitrarily long inputs, and have a fixed length output. But maybe it's obvious that it should have those properties. So any hash function should take arbitrarily long inputs and have a fixed length output, and usually you want them to be efficient, but we've mentioned some exceptions like with key derivation functions and proof of work hash functions and things like that. But this answer is good. And the 10th question is, what's the difference between a hash function that might be used for a hash table data structure and a cryptographically secure hash function? So this maybe wasn't the greatest question because I know not everybody has had the data structures class where you learn about hash tables. But the hash function that you use for a hash table, it just has to be collision resistant, whereas a cryptographically secure hash function has to be collision resistant and resist pre-image attacks. So you might have a function that's very good at being a hash table hash function, so it's fast and it produces a wide spread of hash images. Their collisions are infrequent. But it might also be the case that for that function it's very easy to find pre-images. So that would not be acceptable for a cryptographically secure hash function. So this sort of like, this is something that comes up sometimes. It came up also in random number generation. And also like check digits. So there's a whole bunch of things that work where you're trying to prevent sort of bad things happening randomly by accident. So it would be a bad accident if you hash 2 inputs in a hash table and got the same hash bucket. But it would just be something that happened by accident. In cryptography, you have to resist things that happen by malice. So that's sort of what I was thinking when I asked this question. So a hash table has to resist sort of accidental bad things, but cryptographically secure objects have to resist intentional people trying to break the system on purpose, like finding, trying to deliberately find 2 things that collide or trying to dig out a pre-image or something like that. Okay, so that's the end, and that's the key to the final exam.